Former President Trump held an hour-long press conference Thursday where he lambasted Vice President Harris as incompetent and appeared exasperated on multiple occasions, had questions about Democrats' newfound momentum after elevating Harris to the top of the ticket. Trump spoke to reporters from his Mar-a-Lago estate in a freewheeling event that saw him weigh in on the presidential race debates, whether he is rethinking his strategy and some of his policy proposals on immigration and the economy. He repeatedly bashed Harris's intelligence, arguing she was worse than President Biden and claiming her election would push the country towards economic collapse and world war. But he seemed bothered by reporters who pointed out Harris's surge in polls or the enthusiasm she has generated during recent stops in battleground states. And he at one point floated that it was unconstitutional that Democrats had changed their candidate. Oh, give me a break, Trump said when asked if he was worried about the size of Harris's crowds. Listen, I had 107,000 people in New Jersey. You didn't report it. I'm so glad you asked. What did she have yesterday? 2,000 people? Trump continued. If I ever had 2,000 people, you'd say my campaign is finished. Harris has electrified the Democratic base since she replaced President Biden atop the ticket in late July. Her campaign said she drew a crowd of 14,000 people in Philadelphia on Tuesday, alongside her running mate Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, and 15,000 people were in attendance for the vice president's rally in Detroit on Wednesday. Trump returned to the issue of crowd sizes multiple times throughout the press conference, including when he was asked about the January 6, 2021 riots at the Capitol. The biggest crowd I've ever spoken before was that day, he said, and I'll tell you, it's very hard to find a picture of the crowd. If you look at Martin Luther King Jr., when he did his speech, his great speech, you look at ours, same real estate, same everything, same number of people. If not, we had more. This is just so insane. Oh, bear with me. Polling has shown Harris and Trump running neck and neck in national polls and in battleground states, with former president repeatedly batted away any suggestion that he had to change his approach or ramp up his activity. I haven't recalibrated strategy at all, Trump said. It's the same policies, open borders, weak on crime. I think she's worse than Biden. The former president predicted Harris's honeymoon period, and eventually he sought to tie her to San Francisco, a city that has dealt with issues of crime and homelessness, and where Harris previously served as district attorney. Everything she's touched has turned bad. She's incompetent, Trump said. Okay, this goes on for a little bit longer, but we get the general point. I didn't watch the press conference because, I said before, if I can compliment him, Trump is funny, but at a certain point, I just get tired of it. Like, I'd rather just read it. I'd rather read it summarized to me for in like 2 or 3 minutes than watch an hour of him just sitting there flailing about. Where he says that, when asked about Harris's crowds, give me a break. And, listen, this is something that I've explained before. Crowd sizes do not determine actual people who are going to go out and vote. When he was running for president, Bernie had, I think, 4 or 5 different events in California. I didn't go to all of them, or most of them, because I just either was too far away, had something to do that day, didn't feel like it. So the crowd sizes are not a good indicator of who's going to win an election. Trump had plenty of large crowds during 2020, and it still wasn't enough to beat back that 7 million vote lead that Biden had over him nationwide. So it's just another one of those like little weird things he gets hyper focused on. But then when you talk about his crowd being possibly bigger than the Martin Luther King crowd, that's even dumber, because it's like it's been over 50 years. The U.S. population has increased in terms of both just the fact that more people are here. So I kind of would, even if you were trying to say it was bigger, it's like, well, I would hope it would be, given how many more people we have now than back then. But also, what a strange comparison. Oh yes, when one of the most iconic Americans ever delivered their speech calling for racial equality, that somehow had the same number of people as when a bunch of butthurt fans of mine tried to illegally overturn the results of an election with threats of violence. It's just it's weird. I'm not trying to steal Tim Walz's thing. It's just that's my legitimate reaction to hearing that. Just that comparison is bizarre. Where he later goes into how Harris, the fact that you can get no votes, losing the primary system, and then you can be picked to run for president seems unconstitutional. Okay, we've explained this before. Most Democrats did not vote in the 2024 primary because most Democrats probably didn't even know there was a damn primary. Anytime there's an incumbent president running outside of 1980, there's really not that much enthusiasm for just people running against them or even voting in this system period, which is actually one of the reasons why in 2020, when Trump was running for re-election, they just canceled a lot of primaries and even have them. And they were talking about what's constitutional and the rights of voters. Give me a break. But um, this is fully constitutional. Biden won the primary, and after winning the primary, so that his VP, who might have had a harder time, you know, wouldn't have to do it. He drops out, and then she gets to be at the top of the ticket. I mean, that's the way it goes. If the person who is running for president no longer feels like they can run for president or decides not to, and they've already received a nomination, it's not that hard of a stretch to see where their VP, right, their second in command, is going to take over. Just like if something were to happen to Biden, to where he had to resign or passed away or whatever, then Harris would take over. It's that simple. Like this is part of that same line of succession. That's why there's a number two on the ticket. There were talks during the 2016 election of Trump being replaced on the ticket by the Republicans. And this was after he'd already picked Pence, and if Trump was replaced, then Pence would be at the top of the ticket. Like it's not hard to see where the person that got the most votes decides after getting the most votes, I can't do this anymore, and then their number two steps in for him. It's really just it. I love how they claim to care about democracy, and then they will never condemn the January 6th protesters. Just the hypocrisy is all over the place. But no, I really believe that so when he says the honeymoon period will end, maybe, right? We have to see how these debates go. Of course, there's still a few more months to go before the election. But I do think he needs to change his strategy, because if the best you can do is say she's worse than Biden, open borders, weak on crime, and she's incompetent, you're in for a rude awakening, pal. I mean, it's not hard to criticize Harris in a legitimate way. Hey, look, you when you were Attorney General of California, you did this, that, and the other, right? We've talked about the truancy for parents whose kids didn't go to school, getting put in jail, or the cheap, using California prisoners for labor so they can get cheap labor and not have to pay people as much money. All types of little just stuff that was done that is very much something you could get her over and it would be legitimate, but they're not doing that. They're talking about you're weak, incompetent, open border, which is not true. You're weak on crime. If anything, Harris is tough on crime, actually. Uh, a lot tougher than most of us would probably prefer. But he's really flailing with these comments, and I don't know. The Republicans need to find some better messaging than just this. I've seen other attacks where they're talking about she's not really this ethnicity, and it's like, this is the best you guys have? I mean, everything is based around stuff that just doesn't matter. Like, the Democrats unconstitutionally, which there's nothing in the Constitution about replacing a nominated presidential candidate with their running mate, but nice try. The Democrats went against democracy and picked her instead of Biden. Well, there doesn't really seem to be much uproar about it. You would think if actual Democratic voters were just outraged that Biden's gone as the nominee, you wouldn't see her getting donations. You wouldn't see her rising in polls, but instead you do see that because people, in a lot of cases, prefer her to be the nominee instead of Biden because they saw how horrible he looked during that horrendous debate in June, and really don't want any chance of Trump getting his non-consecutive second term. So if anything, that this whole thing of trying to stand up and be a voice for Democratic primary voters, their voice has spoken, and they want Harris. And whether they voted for her 4 years ago or not, times have changed. And I guess the Republicans are not going to change their message, and that will lead to them losing in November.